Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Seneca Dunmore. She's widely admired for her magnetic personality, high energy, and unrelenting tenacity, which earned her the nickname Pint-Sized Powerhouse. She is an internationally renowned speaker and philanthropist. Seneca founded Dunmore Capital Ventures, a company dedicated to connecting founders with funders. Seneca, welcome to the show today.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
Look, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I just couldn't believe it when you said yes. I really appreciate that. But what I want to make this announcement to our listeners and our viewers: follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Your support matters. It helps us attract guests like Seneca Dunmore. Seneca, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, enjoying this 79-degree weather. I've been in the cold and the snow on the East Coast for a few months now. So I'm
Uh-huh.
excited to be in some warmer weather. So I'm doing great.
Uh-huh. Okay, I understand. I mean, I like Dallas, and they have some nice weather for sure. Have you spent any time in San Antonio?
I have my oldest sister graduated from medical school at UT San Antonio. So I used to spend some summers there while she was in medical school.
Uh-huh. What's the biggest attraction in San Antonio for you?
My favorite is the Riverwalk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I
bet you.
like that. Yeah, I like the Alamo. I love the
Yeah,
River Walk. So those are probably my two favorite attractions.
yeah. My first trip to Houston, to San Antonio, I had to do the Riverwalk, and that's one of my attractions as well. Hey, look, your name, and I've been thinking about this, and we kind of chatted about this briefly before the show started. And I wanted one to give one a clue into it because your name just stood out to me, Seneca.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell us about your first name, Seneca?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different, definitions of my name. It's a Native American name,
Uh-huh.
a Native American tribe out of the New York and Upper Canada area. And so it means place of stone. So it's a Native
Uh-huh.
American name. It's also a Roman name. Most of you are probably familiar with the Roman philosopher Seneca, which was a Stoic philosopher. So those are two, definitions. It means old in
Yeah.
Rome
Yeah,
or
yeah,
aged.
yeah.
So that's really funny. And then, of course, before, you had Central Park in New York, it was
Uh-huh.
Seneca Valley. Most people don't know that it was actually named Seneca Valley before they changed the name to Central Park.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, thanks for that bit of trivia. But let me ask you, did your parents talk with you about why they chose the name Seneca for you?
They didn't put too much thought into it. When my mom was pregnant with me, there was one of the soap operas that she would watch. And there was a gentleman on the soap opera. His name was Seneca, and she loved the name so much. And she was pregnant with me at the time. She decided to name me after him.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I looked up that Roman philosopher, that early philosopher that you mentioned, Seneca, the
Right.
Stoic. And I want to share two things, two short quotes that he made. And you, Seneca in the 21st century, I want you to
Yeah.
give us your take on what you think he meant. How about that?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
here's the first one. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage.
I love that because again, I think, I was talking to a friend of mine recently and I was saying how life is a risk, right? Like
Uh-huh.
anything that you do, like you're taking a risk. So I just feel like to really live this life successfully, you have to take risk. You have to just put yourself out there. You have to jump out there even when you don't have a solid blueprint or a solid plan. You just have to take one step and trust that God will give you direction on the next thing. And
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like
Uh-huh.
life itself is a risk, and to
All
live
right.
life courageously is even better.
Okay, we have the early Seneca. Now we have the 21st century Seneca. Give you your take on what the early Seneca said. Okay, here's the second one for you, Seneca. We suffer more often in our imagination than in reality. What do you think?
I agree with that because I think sometimes um, we play out these scenarios in our head
Mhm.
of what we think could happen, what we think might transpire. And sometimes it's just, our minds getting the best of us, and so, yeah, I think a lot of times we worry about things that never come to pass,
Yeah.
we worry about things that we shouldn't be worried about, that there's no evidence that these things are going to happen. It's kind of like, that's just kind of how our minds work. We naturally, are thinking what could happen or what could go wrong versus thinking about what could go right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that you are a transformational coach and a transformational leader. I figured that you would have some philosophy to expound upon what the early Seneca said. So, and I want to talk now just for briefly, what was your career before, what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I got a scholarship to Tuskegee University. So I graduated number 7 in my high school out of 400 students. So I was in the top 2%, got a scholarship to Tuskegee University, and there I studied biology. So I thought I wanted to go into medicine. I worked for a little while in their neuroanatomy department at Baylor College of Medicine, and decided I didn't want to sit around dead bodies all day. I was working in doing autopsies and cremations. And
Mhm.
so I learned really quickly that biology was not my jam. I didn't want to be stuck in labs and things like that all day. So once I finished my degree at Tuskegee, I came back home, got my master's in information technology. And so I worked for about 10 years in tech.
Mhm.
So everything from development, building websites, building, databases. And so there is when I really started honing in on my communication and negotiation skills.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I had the opportunity to work for this multi-billion-dollar human capital consulting firm out of DC.
Yeah.
And so there I was doing a lot of contract negotiation for oil and gas companies. That was mostly my book of business. And I became really good at it, right? So I was, negotiating these multi-million-dollar contracts. I was doing business development, and everything that I touched was around technology. So I worked for, about 10 solid years in tech. And then I realized that, I was making everybody else a lot of money, right? They were honing in on all of my skills and talents, and I was just going home with a salary. So yeah, so before the speaking, before the coaching, before the funding, I was I was a tech girl in corporate America
Yeah.
trying to climb that corporate ladder, and realized really quickly that that was not going to be the end all be all for me.
Yeah, yeah. But you have a diverse background, everything from biology to tech to entrepreneurship, contract negotiation. There's a lot there, and I want to explore many facets of your career. We'll get to Dunmore Capital Ventures before we leave today. But I also, in checking you out, this is a transformational thinker. This
Yeah.
person here is not an average thinker. So I want you to give us a sense of how you feel about adversity and resilience, and whatever experiences you may have with both of those ideas.
I feel like adversity is part of the course. It's going to come. Um, and I feel like if there's anything that you want out of life, it's going to require resiliency. Is going to require that you push through. It's going to require that you um, give it your best shot. I remember seeing this quote one time. It was like, you can give up, you can give in, or you can give it your all.
Uh-huh.
I always decide to give it my all. So yeah, I just think adversity is one of those things, like it's part of the human experience. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you fall apart every time something doesn't go your way, or just like you stated in the beginning, like it takes courage to live.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really does.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. As I said, you are a philosopher as well. I need to add that to my introduction. But you quoted Booker T. Washington. I think I got it right, and
Okay.
I hope that you recall making a statement or writing it somewhere. And the quote by the great Booker T. Washington was, "If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else."
Yeah.
And when that appeared around you, I thought, boy, that seemed to resonate with her. Why is that so meaningful to you, that quotation?
Well, I remember someone telling me years ago, and this really stuck with me. They were like, the best way to get what you want out of life is to
Mm,
help somebody else get what they want, right?
mm,
And so that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, helping people to find funding in their business. Because again, you know, people always say like, "Oh, money isn't, everything," but you
yeah.
can't do anything without it, right? We
That's
we live in a very capitalistic society. Let's just be
yeah,
honest about it, right? And you need funds to live a fruitful life.
yeah,
It's not the end all be all, but trust me, to someone who doesn't have it, you know,
Yeah. I
it's a
tell you,
totally
I
different
think
story.
it was attributed to the late Zig Ziglar that money isn't everything, but it's right up there with oxygen.
That's right.
Tells us,
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's necessary. And
yeah,
so the more people that you can help
uh,
to achieve, their goals and dreams and accomplish what they want out of life, it's just a natural, almost like a side effect that you
yeah,
also get the thing that you want as well. Like
yeah.
it's almost impossible to help other individuals to get what they want out of life and not in return get the very thing that you want.
This must be a truth, because here's Booker T. Washington. He died in 1915, and Seneca Dunmore in the 21st century, and you are articulating that same philosophy. So I guess this is always true, isn't it?
Oh, always. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm not sure about this one, but I think you wrote something that's entitled The Power of Positioning,
Mhm.
7 Steps to Transform Your Greatest Obstacle, back to adversity, into your greatest opportunity.
Yeah.
What is that? And kind of give us a glimpse into what you tried to share in that work of yours.
Yeah, well, that framework was born out of some adversity, right? So when I was in college at Tuskegee, I was having some digestive issues that kind of came out of nowhere. And that turned into 7 years of health issues, digestive issues, throwing up every day. I was going to all these different gastroenterologists. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And so one day I went in for a simple outpatient procedure that went terribly wrong. I went in for an endoscopy where they stick that long scope down your throat and it has a little camera on the end because they're trying to see if there's any polyps or cancer or ulcers. And so they couldn't get the scope down because my throat was so strictured, right? And stricture just means it's closing off. And so, when the procedure started, it was just me, the nurse, and the doctor. And when I woke up, there was about 15 people in the room. So my dad was sitting on the bed next to me, my mom standing up in the corner. There were about 3 surgeons in front of me, a couple of nurses, anesthesiologists. So of course, I knew something is wrong. And so one of the doctors steps forward and he said, Ms. Dunmore, we have a problem. We noticed you had a really tight stricture and we tried to dilate it and it ruptured. So right now you're bleeding internally and we need to get you into surgery immediately. So literally, they're rushing me into surgery. I come out of surgery about 3 hours later, completely blind.
Wow.
And then I stayed in ICU for about a week. They moved me out of ICU into my own room. And then that night I was accidentally overdosed on morphine by one of the nurses and went into
Wow.
cardiac arrest.
Mm.
So, I'm 25 years old, normal college student working on her master's. And that turned into, you know, waking up with a ruptured esophagus, bleeding internally, emergency surgery, waking up in ICU blind, and now going into cardiac arrest. So it was a crazy time. And of course, my saving grace was I found out about this holistic facility up in Massachusetts called Canyon Ranch.
Mhm.
And that's what saved my life.
Yeah.
I remember telling a friend about this place. I learned about Canyon Ranch through a book that I read by Dr. Mark Hyman, and he studies functional and holistic medicine, right?
Uh-huh.
And so um, I read the book and realized like, oh my God, I need to get to this place. And
Mm.
so I told a girlfriend of mine who I was in grad school with, and she said, well, Seneca, how much does it cost? And I was like, well, it's $12,000. I don't have that kind of money. So I'll just try to find another doctor here. And she said, well, if money wasn't the issue, would you go?
Mm.
I said, girl, I leave tomorrow. And she said, oh, meet me at the bank in the morning. So she literally
Wow.
funded the whole trip, flights, sky miles and all. And it was the best 7 days of my life. What I had been dealing with for 7 years had been totally transformed in 7 days with holistic medicine. So of course, when I moved back to Houston, I was joining a new church. And of course, they asked me the golden question was, tell us your story. What's your
Mhm.
testimony? And I gave them that testimony and they were like, oh my God, you need to tell more people that story.
Mhm.
And so, look up, I started a whole business around that. And so I
Wow.
started a framework called,
Mm.
the power of positioning, because I clearly remember a moment where I was crying out to God. I was sad, hating life, hating my whole situation, thinking, why me? Why am I going through this? And I remember God saying, I'm not punishing you, I'm positioning you.
Wow. I love it. I love that one. The power of
Yeah.
positioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And so the 7 steps were basically me showing people, kind of how I navigated that whole process and how I came out on the other side, how I turned my greatest tragedy into my greatest triumph, right? So
Yeah. Well,
the
it seems like you're good at coining phrases like that. The
yeah,
power of positioning 7 steps is graspable. That's great. So
yeah,
what's the first step? If you don't mind sharing just a couple of steps with us.
the power of possibilities.
Whoa, I love it. Possibility Action Network, baby.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the power of
okay.
possibilities,
Yeah,
which
okay.
basically just tells people that you always have a choice, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Meaning there's because a lot of times when we're going through things are happening in our lives, we feel hopeless, we feel
yeah,
defeated, we feel like we don't have a choice in the matter, but there's always a choice. You can choose how you feel about it, you can
yeah.
choose how you respond to it, right? So you
Mhm.
always have a choice. So that first step is the power of possibilities.
Okay, give us one more of your steps. One more.
Let's see. I would say one of my favorite is the power of proactive participation,
Uh-huh.
meaning, a lot of times when we're going through things, I grew up in in church where it was always about, oh, cry out to God, pray to God, God will change your situation. Well, true, but divine intervention does not negate human responsibility, right? So just as much as God will intervene and help, you have a responsibility to be a part of your own rescue, to
Yeah,
be a part
yeah,
of your own help. So it's your responsibility to help yourself, right? It's
yeah, yeah.
not, you can pray and do something about your situation at the same time, because a
I,
lot of times we'll pray and sit on our hands and we just expect God to do everything for us. And it's like,
yeah.
no, he's giving you the power to change your situation.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pint-Sized Powerhouse, you just expressed it. Possibility, action. That's right. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah, look at
Yeah,
that.
look
The
at
two
that. Look at
step.
that. Yeah. So you are an advocate, or at least a strong proponent of holistic medicine, broadly speaking, that people can do
Oh,
a lot to take care
absolutely.
of themselves. Yeah. What kinds of things that you think people can do to help themselves, holistically speaking, be healthier from the in body and also healthier in mind?
I think food is medicine.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah, your food should be your medicine, right?
Uh,
So, if I get a headache, which is very rare,
mhm.
the first thing I don't think about, oh, I need a Tylenol or Advil. I think, what's causing this headache? And most of the time it's probably I'm dehydrated, right? So the first thing I'm looking for is a glass of water,
Mm,
you
mm,
know. So I just think if we really pay attention to our bodies and if we're putting the right things in, right, then
mm.
your body will naturally take care of you. If you
Yeah.
take care of your body will naturally take care of you. So if you're exercising on a regular, if you're eating right, your body will take care of you. And a lot of times, especially here in the United States, we've been so indoctrinated to believe that, oh, just take 2 of these and call me in the morning, right? Just take
Mhm.
this pill, take this, inject this shot or whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. And a lot of times we can fix a lot of these man-made issues through simply diet and exercise
Yeah.
and
Is
nutrition.
isn't that something? Look, we're speaking the same language here because
Yeah.
I think you're right. What you're saying is that people, well, let me ask you, do you think people can reverse some of the chronic diseases that they may face now with proper nutrition? What's
Oh,
your feeling?
absolutely. I mean, I 100% reversed all of the issues that I was having through nutrition. I remember when I got to the holistic facility, I was taking 13 pills a day.
Mm,
My and the thing was they didn't even know what was wrong. They were just giving me all this medication treating the symptoms, but it wasn't fixing the problem, right? So they never made a diagnosis and they didn't know what the problem was. They were just giving me all this medication to mask the symptoms, which in return was making the problem worse, right?
right,
Because I was
right.
just putting a band-aid over, you know, a huge problem.
Mhm.
But once I got off all the medication and started, I had a private chef who prepared all my meals. I had a nutritionist that I work with every day to make sure that, my nutrition levels and my minerals and, all these different things were right. Yeah, like literally I transformed my whole situation through holistic medicine. Everything that they treated me with was holistic. It was no medication, it was no pills or anything like that. It was Ayurvedic and homeopathic and Chinese herbs and nutrition and food and
Yeah,
chakra therapy and things like that. Like they never had to inject me with anything or make me take anything, any chemical substances. It was all, holistic treatments.
That's amazing. I want to throw some things at you and just have you respond from your experience and just your feeling about it. And I want to make sure everyone knows Seneca is not speaking as a medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, but this is her personal testimony based on her journey. So, Seneca, let me ask you, let's say that someone is faced with obesity, not
Yeah.
to the extent, of nothing outrageous, but there's 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight. Do you think that's something that a person can manage through proper nutrition? What's your
Oh,
sense of that?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, exercise, I mean, unless there's some type of underlying medical issue that
Uh,
they're unaware of, you could, you know, getting in the gym every day, exercising every day, eating properly, you can fix that problem. I literally remember when I was a sophomore in high school, there was a young lady who, who took classes with me. And
yeah,
I mean, she was clearly, you know, about 5 to probably 300 pounds. She was morbidly obese. And of course, I was a cheerleader at the time, and so I'm in the best shape of my life. But I vividly remember this young lady getting out there on the track every day walking. She would put on one of those big black, plastic suits where it just makes you sweat.
yeah,
And I remember every day, like clockwork, when the cheerleaders would go out there to practice, she was on that track with that big black suit on, walking every day. She came back that next semester unrecognizable.
wow,
She had lost all the weight, all of her health issues, went away. She looked amazing. And guess what? Most people, they'll lose all that weight and then bounce back, right? They'll start gaining it again. We're still friends to this day, and she still managed to keep herself
yeah,
at a healthy weight. She looks
yeah,
amazing. But yeah, I mean, she just made a decision to one day, she was tired of being morbidly obese. She was having all kind of health issues and complications, and so she got out there and she just walked.
yeah,
It wasn't like she was lifting weights or doing any type of strenuous. She literally just walked every day and changed her diet, incorporated more fruits and vegetables, incorporated more water, and literally just walked every day. And
yeah,
literally, she came back, the next semester, like 150 pounds lighter and
right.
she still looks amazing.
That's a good story for sure. So we
Yeah.
can learn to manage our weight by proper nutrition. I like to say movement, as you've just
Movement.
explained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me throw something else at you. And again, we're just talking now from your experience and someone who has looked into holistic health and the like. What about? Have you heard anything about type 2 diabetes? Because today
I
now,
have.
when I look at the news on TV, sometimes, my gosh, the commercials that these people are throwing at us is like crazy. What about that? What have you heard about managing type 2 diabetes, if anything? If anything,
Well, yeah, I mean, you can see nowadays there's like those facilities on every corner, where individuals have to go in and, filter out their blood. I forget the name of it, but yeah, I feel like it's a huge problem in the United States because
mm,
number one, there's so many things that we put into our foods that are so harmful that
yeah,
a lot of other countries you could never get away with that in other countries, right? So, we have tons of pesticides and herbicides and we're injecting our meats with human growth hormones and antibiotics and all kind of things that are not good for our bodies.
yeah,
And so as a result, we're seeing the effects of that because again, they're starting to put more and more of those substances into our foods
mm,
and it's showing up, because
yeah,
again, you see now dialysis are popping up everywhere for individuals with diabetes and things like that. Kidney failure is on the rise, liver failure is on the rise. It's just, yeah,
yeah,
you would think because we're, quote unquote, the greatest country in the world that we would have, better food, better nutrition, better healthcare systems and things like that. And clearly, we're eating ourselves to death. We're killing ourselves a lot of times with the things that we put into our bodies.
yeah. That's great reminders for sure. Okay, so what prompted Seneca your speaking journey? Because I know you've traveled all over the world. You do a lot of. What prompted your speaking journey?
It came out of the adversity from the health issues that I was dealing with.
Uh,
When I moved back to Houston and I joined that church, and of course they asked me my testimony. And so I remember telling them, and my women's ministry director said, "Oh my God, you've got to tell more people that story." So literally, every time I looked up, I was being asked to come speak somewhere. Whether
Mm.
it was a conference, a retreat, a summit, whatever the case may be, I was always being asked to come and speak. And literally a light bulb went off in my head one day, like, why not get paid to speak? So I
Yeah.
literally left my corporate America job in October of 2014, started my motivational speaking business in May of 2015. And by July of 2016, I was international. I was doing my very first international speaking engagement in South Africa. And 50 countries later, here I am. So
Whoa.
yeah, it
You've
was
literally been all over the world. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Literally, that's how I got started. It was not something that I planned. Of course,
uh,
my background is in science and tech. So I thought I was just going to be one of these techie girls and that was going to be my life. And God had other plans for me. So yeah, it was one of those things where I tell people, my calling found me. I did not find it.
that's beautiful. I mean, that's absolutely beautiful when that happens. So when you think about your speaking,
Mhm.
what's your 2 or 3 core messages that you try to convey when you're on the stage?
Oh, just depends on the audience, but definitely the positioning, right? Showing people that um you have a say so in your life. Like
Mm,
you know, everybody wants autonomy over their own lives. Everybody wants to have that freedom and flexibility. And so that is possible, right? And that we are the masters of our own fate.
mm,
So that's one of the things that I always try to communicate. When it comes to funding and things like that, I always try to communicate that, um, business is a team sport. You should be in
yeah.
business for yourself, but you should never be in business by yourself, right? So that it does take a community, it does take a team. And
Yeah.
so I think independence is so overrated. We're so indoctrinated to believe that we've got to do it all by ourselves. And that's not how you grow and scale a business, that it needs to be all hands on deck. You need a solid team to make it happen.
Wow.
One of the things I try to communicate is that the best pathway to financial capital is social and intellectual capital, meaning your network and what they bring to the table. You need to be leveraging all of that. So of
Yeah.
course, if you're in the type of networks where you guys are stagnant and you're not moving, you probably need to move out of that network and find people who are already where you want to be.
Mm,
I think the problem that most of us have is that we've grown up with some certain people. It's like, oh, they've been friends with me all my life. I've known them since the third grade. But guess what? You guys are going in circles because you're unequally yoked, right? As you're starting to move up and you know, um, you want a different life, and you're trying to still drag people who are still just kind of coasting right here.
mm,
And so now as you're elevating, they become dead weight,
mm.
right? They become dead weight. So, there's a season for those friendships, and then there's a season when you have to let them go.
Wow.
I love to use the analogy about the spaceship, so if you've ever watched the spaceship, take off, there's, 4 components of the spaceship, right? You've got the external fuel tank, right? Which is that big old orange component in the middle. You've got the orbiter, right? And then which sits on the back, which is the smallest piece. And then on the sides, you've got the solid rocket boosters.
Mm,
The only the only mission of those solid rocket boosters is to help it get off the ground and to get into to break the Earth's atmosphere. And guess what? What happens to those solid rocket boosters when they're out of fuel?
mm,
They fall off.
mm.
They fall
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
So there are certain people in your life who are they're solid rocket boosters. They're there to help you get to a different atmosphere. And guess what? And when their mission is accomplished, they need to fall off
Wow.
so they
Okay.
can keep going.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody has been a solid rocket booster for somebody else. So when people say, "Oh, well, that seems so harsh," no, you just like there's solid rocket boosters in your life. You've been somebody's solid rocket booster where you've helped them to get to a certain level. And guess what? You can't go with them the rest of the way.
Mm.
You're not equipped to go with them the rest of the way, and so you have to fall off.
I love it. I love it. I get that. Your messaging is motivating, encouraging, empowering. But let me ask you this. And this is not a one size fits all, but frequently on social media,
Mhm.
we can find other kinds of messaging. We can't make it because it's too hard. We can't make it because some people are privileged than others. We can't all of these kinds of things. So how do you deal with the notion that some people can't make it because of, and when you're saying, we can't make it with the right action, right attitude. Do you see what
Oh,
I'm trying to ask
absolutely.
you? Huh?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's one of those things like we have to state the obvious, right? Racism is real.
Yeah,
Like there are certain things that are very real, right? This
sure.
country was founded on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we can't overshadow that, but we can allow ourselves to use that as a permanent crutch
Huh.
to say
Okay.
that, oh, I can't, I can't get to where I want in life because the white man or because white people. No, because in my life, some of my biggest advocates, some of my biggest investors have been white men,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
so for me, it's been all about me leveraging my community and getting in proximity to the right people
mm,
who have a heart to want to help me, right? Our friendships are mutually beneficial, meaning I bring something to the table just as much as they bring something to the table.
mm,
So I think a lot of times when people feel like that is because they're, number one, you're in the wrong circles,
mm.
right? You need to be around people who are constantly pushing you, constantly elevating you. You guys, are helping each other to rise to the top.
Yeah.
If you're, if all you're going to do is sit in these circles where you're going to complain about how the world is so hard and it's so bad out here, well, that's, you're speaking those things into existence and those things become your reality. But if you change your language, you'll change your life,
Huh.
right? You get around the right people, you will see your situation change. And
Yeah.
again, you have to get around people who already are where you want to be.
Yeah. So, I want to focus on this a little bit more. And you're a thought leader. I mean, you are an idea creator. And I
Yes.
want you to think about children, because I often wonder, how do children feel when they get the messaging? Of course, you're right. There's a reality, especially in American society. There's a reality that you can't get around. But how do children feel? How do they progress when they're always hearing things like why they can't make it? All of these problems exist in society that come from this type of background. So therefore, they're statistically likely to fail. What type of messaging would you say we can give our children to encourage them more than perhaps we're doing now?
Yeah, well, there's a quote that I love by Frederick Douglass, and he says, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men."
Mm,
So we have a responsibility that while they're young to mold them and to shape them, because again, by the time a child is 5, they're, how they view life and how they view the world is kind of set, right? And it's really hard to start changing that. I was fortunate that I grew up in a two-parent household. My mom and dad are still married. They've been married 57 years. I grew up in a very loving, functional household. So I wasn't looking for anything outside of my house or outside of myself because I got all of the affirmation and the love and affection that I needed at home, right? I was always told I was beautiful. I was always told I was smart. I was always told I love you. So, that I live with that, right? So that's why I've been able to, conquer my space and attack the world the way I have, because I grew up with parents who always made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't do, that if I put my mind to to something that I could achieve, that, I had a network of individuals around me who were rooting for me and had my best interests at heart.
mm,
And so I know a lot of people don't have that, right? Where we have a lot of broken homes, a lot of single family homes, whatever the case may be. But I think at some point you get to a point in your life where you have a defining moment and you have a decision to make for yourself.
mm.
Doesn't matter how you grew up, doesn't matter if your mom or dad was there, doesn't matter if you finished school, doesn't matter if you had a child out of wedlock, it doesn't matter if you went to jail, it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
All of us have sinned and fallen short. We all
Uh-oh.
have something, right? We all come with trauma, we all come with something. But at some moment, you have to make up in your mind that I want something different for myself.
Mm, mm,
And guess what? It doesn't matter if your mom was there, if your dad was an alcoholic, your mom was what, it doesn't matter anymore. You have a decision to make.
mm.
And it might be a little bit harder because you have a little bit more trauma to work through. Maybe you need to get some, some professional help. Listen, that's fine. But again, your life is your responsibility.
Yeah.
And when you take ownership of your life and how you want your life to manifest, then the sky's the limit.
Uh-huh. I love that. That's a better message than you cannot make in because of, for sure. Okay,
Yeah.
now look, we've been talking about your public speaking and all of that and the type of messages you share. I came across something, I think it was this morning. I was a little bit checking about Seneca.
Sure.
Is this the confident and compelling communicator speaker program? What
Yeah.
is that? What is that?
You know, that was actually born out of, I have a friend that I went to elementary, middle school, and high school. She
Mm,
ended up reaching out to me one day and she said, you know, Seneca, I've been, you know, she's a wife, she's a mother, she has her bachelor's and master's, she's been running her own business for about 20 years. So, you know, sister's doing well.
yeah.
And she said, you know, Seneca, I've been getting a lot more requests to come speak with different organizations about what I do. And she said,
Mhm.
listen, I'm not interested in becoming a motivational speaker like you. I'm not interested in becoming a professional speaker. She said, I just want to become a confident, more compelling speaker.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And literally that went off in my head like, you know what? I if she feels that way, then there's probably other people in my network who, yeah, they don't want to become a motivational speaker. Maybe they don't want to travel the world and get on stages as frequently
Yeah.
as I do, but maybe they just want to become more confident, more compelling communicators.
Wow.
And so I built this program where it basically teaches individuals how to hone in on their communication skills, right? How
Yeah.
to tell their story. You know, how to identify the audience that they are uniquely qualified to serve, how to, you know, just basically how to become a better communicator. So I put a whole program together. And it's funny because I built that program in a couple of weeks. She and I worked together for about 8 weeks, but in her 6 weeks, she ended up securing a six-figure um, contract
Wow.
just by improving her communication.
Whoa. That says a
Yeah,
lot. That says a great deal. The confident,
absolutely.
compelling communicator speaker program. Where can people find information about this? In fact, let me pause a bit and say,
Sure.
would you make sure that I get if you have a website, make sure that I get that to put into the show notes because people want to know how can I find this confident, compelling communicator speaker
Yes,
program. That's awesome. Now,
sure.
you've been to a lot of countries. When I did my research, it was like 45, but you said, look, you've been over 50. What's your favorite country beside the United, not considering the United States? Don't want
I
to put you
love,
on the spot, but I just put you on the spot.
yeah, no. I love Kenya. Kenya is one of my favorite countries.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely breathtaking. If you ever get a chance to see Rift Valley, like you cannot look at Rift Valley and not know that there is a God.
Uh-huh.
Like it is confirmation, like only God could have been
Yeah.
this brilliant. Only God could have done this. Only
Yeah.
God could have thought of this.
Uh-huh.
So Kenya is one of my favorite countries. I love Ghana. Ghana was amazing. I got a chance to go do some work at the University of Ghana at their Institute of African Studies in 2019 and 2020. I love the United Arab Emirates because it just luxury on a whole nother level. I've stayed at some of the best hotels, ate at some of the best restaurants. So I love
Yeah.
Dubai. Um, I love Portugal. Portugal is one of probably the sexiest city I've ever been to. It's, you know,
Ooh.
I always say it's a lover city. So if you're, you know, if you're married and you're thinking about where you want to take, you know, your loved one, or if you're getting married and you want to have a nice honeymoon, I would always recommend Portugal. Israel, I had a great time in Israel when I went there for the first time. I went to Tel Aviv.
Mm.
Food was amazing, beaches were incredible, people were incredible. So yeah, there's been quite a few places that I've been to that have just been absolutely breathtaking and just amazing. Of course, I love Paris. Paris is
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many countries that I've been to that I just absolutely love.
Oh gosh, it sounds like you're having an amazing life journey. That's amazing. All right, so I want to go into now entrepreneurship, which
Yeah.
is which is a huge love of yours. But I want to start with something that you said. I've never seen it here. I've never heard anyone say it like this before. So I want to start with this. You said, let me find it in my notes. Let me find it. You said entrepreneurs, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, eat what they kill. Whoa,
Yeah,
what does she
yeah.
mean by that?
Yeah, so it's like, you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, nobody's handing you a check at the end of 2 weeks, right? Nobody's paying for your dental bills. Nobody's paying for your medical bills. Nobody's paying for your, you know, vision appointments and things like that. Like you literally have to get up every day. And if you want to eat, you got to go out there and kill it.
Oh, wow.
Right? So if
Yeah,
I want steak, I got to go out here and kill that cow. If I
yeah,
want chicken, I got to go out there and kill that chicken today.
yeah,
So yeah, it's one of those things where you've got to be motivated and disciplined enough to get after it
yeah,
and 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 know that nobody's going to be standing there telling you what to do and how to do it. Like, you got to be motivated and disciplined enough to make it happen for yourself every day. Right.
Wow.
So you're your own payroll, you're your own human resource department, you're your own strategy department, you're your own, you are, it starts and ends with you as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah.
so if you want it, you got to get up and kill it every day.
Now, I'm not going to leave entrepreneurship, but there's something else percolating in me about you. And I didn't see this. I should have seen it, but I didn't. I should have seen this, but I did not. There's something very spiritual about you. What I'm noticing is that you're able to catch the spiritual inspiration that comes through you. My examples, the power of positioning, eat what you kill. It's like
Yeah.
something just comes through. You say, oh, you tag it. You say, that's mine. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Dunmore Capital Ventures,
Yeah.
what prompted you to start it?
So during the pandemic, of course, we saw the great resignation where, so many people of color were leaving corporate spaces and now wanting to try their hand at entrepreneurship. But again, everybody was running into the same problem, which was a lack of resources, a lack of capital, a lack of funding. So literally, between February and April of 2020 alone, more than 41% of Black businesses went out of business, not because they weren't savvy businesses, not because they weren't doing good businesses, not because they weren't smart enough to run a business, simply because they did not have enough financial resources to keep the businesses afloat. And so I just remember sitting, at home one day in my beautiful apartment in Houston and thinking to myself, man, what can I do to help? And of course, again, I come from a science and technology background. I don't come from investing or, I don't have a good degree in accounting and finance, but I just remember God putting it on my heart to help these particular individuals. And so what I did was, I started going out, speaking with different investors. I started, requesting them as friends on LinkedIn and sending them messages and setting up meetings. I started calling the banks and, figuring out what type of programs they were offering to help, minorities and women of color and veterans and, marginalized and economically disenfranchised communities. What were they doing to help these individuals, as we were continuing to navigate this global pandemic? And out of that was birthed Dunmore Capital Ventures. I literally met an investor via LinkedIn who became my very first investor. He invested $25,000. So even, when I was thinking about starting Dunmore Capital Ventures, he's the one who funded it. I told him about my idea. I started putting together a conference because I wanted a comprehensive way to bring this information to the market and bring it to the people who needed it most. And so I came up with this, conference called Access Granted, which is about, equipping undercapitalized business owners with the financial resources, the capacity building tools, and the financial education that they need to grow and scale their business. And so that's how Dunmore Capital Ventures came to be. I literally was working with an investor and who made an investment and said, well, you should start your own thing. You should start your own business around helping, marginalized and economically disenfranchised communities get the funding that they need. And so that's how Dunmore Capital Ventures came about. And he was my very first investor.
Wow. There you go. Another one of those inspirations, and you tagged it. Oh, that's mine. That's awesome. So you build strategic alliances. Tell me about that. What does that mean? How do you go about doing that?
Listen, hey, if I had to tell people the one thing they need to focus on when it comes to business and really getting what they want out of life is building strategic partnerships.
Mm,
It's all about, like I said, leveraging that social and intellectual capital to get to the financial capital.
mhm,
So yeah, it's really important. Like relationships, life is about relationships. Wealth is about relationships, right? Because I always tell people wealth begets wealth. So if
mm,
you want to become wealthy, you need to put yourself around wealthy people because naturally they will show you how to build wealth.
yeah.
So yeah, I always tell people relationships, the key to building solid relationships is that advocacy, right? These individuals become your advocates. So I want people mentioning my names in rooms that I don't even have to be in, right? I
Yeah.
want to make sure that I'm building such solid relationships that people are mentioning my names in rooms because again, people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. The only way that they know you, like you, and trust you is that you've got to cultivate relationships with them. You've got to get in front of them. You've got to talk with them. You've got to plant good seeds. You've got to do it. And so
Yeah.
again, life in general is just about the right relationships.
Yeah, I tell you what, I hear it over and over and over again, many of the things that you're sharing. Some of your clients and associates, people you've worked with, talk about your superpowers. In fact, some of them have videos about you. I said, well, look at this. But they say that one of your superpowers, I'm not making this word up. It's what they say. One of your superpowers is teaching professionals. Would you say that's a superpower? And how do you work with professionals?
Yeah, I think that is a superpower of mine, especially, I guess, maybe just coming from that whole corporate world
Mhm.
where, most of the individuals that, when I was in corporate, generally, because I had a tech background, I was generally the only woman of color in the room. I was generally the only woman of color, and I was generally the most educated person in the room, right? Because I had a degree in technology, not just a degree, but a master's degree in technology.
Yeah.
And I had worked on both the business and tech side of things. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a beautiful life. Like,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. They tell them they mentioned another superpower. I want to come back to that, but you said something that just prompted me to ask this question.
yeah,
You're the only Black woman in the room, with a bunch of other business people.
yeah.
How did that make you feel? How did it make you feel?
I used to feel like you're welcome.
So
You're welcome.
you weren't intimidated at all.
Not at all.
You didn't feel like an imposter or anything like that.
No, I felt like they were privileged to have me in the room. And
Uh-huh.
it was an honor and a privilege to have me in the room,
Yeah.
right? Because
It's
there
no
were
wonder they called you the pint-sized powerhouse.
yeah, yeah, I didn't feel intimidated at all because again, generally I was the only woman. I was the only woman of color. I was the most educated person in the room. They brought me in to negotiate the contracts because I had such good negotiation and communication skills.
Yeah.
So I always felt like just as much as that I deserved to be in the room, that it was an honor and a privilege for them to be in the room with me.
That's
So
great. Oh gosh.
I never felt out of place because it was a room full of white men and Indian
Yeah.
men and
Yeah.
Asian men. No,
You
I fit
know,
right on in.
something else just occurs to me. I'm not sure. I hope it's appropriate to ask this question because what I'm feeling, the feedback I'm getting feedback from you. I'm getting something from energetically. And we
Yes.
hear a lot about privileges today in our society. And of course, a lot of people with privileges. But then I hear you say, you're privileged. I get this feeling from you that you feel, look, I'm a privileged person. Am I getting this wrong? Maybe I'm getting the wrong message here, but
No, I feel like I've been very privileged in this life.
uh,
That my melanin alone is a privilege, right? That I
yeah,
come from the wealthiest continent on earth, right? That civilization started with me,
wow.
right? That, you know, philosophy and medicine started in Africa, right? That,
Mhm.
astrology and all of these things, like it started with us.
Mm.
So to feel anything other than, privileged and that I belong would be
Wow.
crazy.
Seneca, I love your mindset. I love you because another way of talking about privilege could leave me like depressed. So, oh my God. But I hear you, so look, I can't contain myself.
Yeah,
You got me pumped up. uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But look, the people you've worked with also say that another superpower of yours, if I got it wrong, just correct me. But my understanding of it is that you can teach business owners. Would you say that's one of your superpowers?
It is. Yeah, I love teaching business owners. And I learned how to do business by just doing business. So like
Hmm.
again, I didn't come from a business school or the business world. I partnered with mentors. I got around the right people because I feel like, again, I think education is a beautiful thing, right? So I would definitely recommend that if you want to go to school and get your education, I'm all for it, right? But I feel like the best education that I've gotten has been out of school,
Yeah.
the school of hard knocks, right? Partnering with the right people, getting in front of the right investors, getting the right mentors. That's where the true education has been for me. And that's why I've been able to really, excel in the things that I wanted to do because I've always partnered with individuals who were already there, right? Already doing the thing that I wanted to do. So say like when I wanted to become a motivational speaker, I found out about a young lady who was introduced to me. She was already a multimillionaire. She was already a motivational speaker. She was already international. She had a conference in Delaware. And so at the time I was living in Houston, and I just thought like, oh my God, I need to go to her conference. Her conference was $4,000. And that
Mm,
didn't include flight or hotel or any of that. But let me tell you, what I learned from her, I mean, she gave us $100,000 worth of knowledge. So I
wow.
felt like, oh, I only paid $4,000. But
Yeah,
guess what? After attending her conference, a few months later, I became an international speaker. You see what I'm saying?
I see
So
what you're saying.
that
Yeah,
$4,000 investment was so worth it for me because it pays me dividends even now.
that's great. I love it.
Right.
You invest in yourself. You don't mind investing
Absolutely.
in yourself. That's awesome. Yeah. What's it like, Seneca, negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract? What's that feeling like?
Beautiful feeling because money is one of those things where if you're not scared to talk about it,
Uh,
it's a beautiful thing. It's an easy thing to talk about. I like talking about money.
mm,
Because if you notice, even in the Bible references heaven about 700 times,
mm.
but it references money, wealth, land over 2,000 times,
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So not only is God concerned about our salvation and about us, spending eternity with him, but
Mhm.
he's also concerned about us living a fruitful life here on earth,
Yeah.
having all of the financial resources that we need here on earth. So that's why I tell people we shouldn't be afraid to talk about money because there's all kind of examples throughout the Bible of him talking about wealth and talking
Mhm.
about money.
Yeah, we can do a lot of good with resources, right?
We can
Most,
do a lot of
a lot
good,
of good for
right?
sure. Yeah.
When people say, oh, well, money is the root of all evil. No, it says the love of money is the
Yeah.
root of all evil. It doesn't
Yeah.
say money is not inherently evil because again, there's so much good that you can do in the world
Uh-huh.
with money.
That's for sure. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So look, I gather that there's another passion of yours. Well, not another passion. We've been talking about your passion all the while, but I want to put it this way. And I don't know where I got this, but it was that one of your passions is serving the underserved. If I got that
Absolutely.
right, yeah, please.
Absolutely. So, out of my health issues,
Mm,
I remember one day at church, one of the ministry pastors was talking about a trip that they were getting ready to do to Kenya.
mm,
And they were doing a medical mission where they were going out there to serve different tribes and provide them free medical care, right? These were tribes that didn't have access to the resources. They lived in a lot of, remote areas where they didn't have doctors and things like that. So they just didn't have access to the health care that they needed. And so I decided to join that mission. And it was life changing. I love serving the underserved. I always tell people, to me, true love is when you can give to someone who has nothing to give you in return.
mm, mm.
When you can give something to someone knowing that they have nothing to give you in return, because again, we were in very remote areas where, sometimes there's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no, sanitation and things like that. And you've got to give it your all, right? We're pouring into people who, some of them haven't seen doctors all of their lives.
Yeah.
And so to come out there and to provide all the free medical care that they need, I have never met more grateful people, more
Mm,
deserving people.
mm,
And so yeah, that's one thing that I'm truly passionate about. And I made a promise to God in 2012 when I did my first mission. I said, Lord, if you keep me healthy enough to continue to do this work, I'll do it for the rest of my life. And so I've done several medical missions in Kenya and Angola and South Africa and Ghana. I even did a mission trip up in Brooklyn, New York years ago. We were working at a substance abuse
oh,
facility. So we were working with women who were dealing with substance abuse and domestic violence. And so, nothing warms my heart more than giving back to someone who has nothing to give me in return.
wow. I love it, Seneca. I love it. Look, before we go, I know that you put on business conferences all over the country, perhaps
Yes.
even all over the world. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I do an annual conference called Access Granted. And again, that conference is all about equipping undercapitalized business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, real estate professionals with the financial education because most of us didn't grow up with financial literacy. So, there's a huge financial deficit in our community. The second thing is capacity building, making sure that we even have the capacity for funding because a lot of times that's what keeps us from the funding. Not that we're not smart enough, is that we just simply don't have the capacity to receive the funding. And last but not least, I always tell people, if you're not cutting a check, then what are we doing, right? So it takes money to run a business. So one of the things that we're highly concerned about is making sure that we can get founders in front of funders who can cut checks, who can give them the financial resources that they need to grow and scale their business. And so that might look, very different, right? I deal with venture capitalists, I deal with angel investors, I deal with the banks, right? So there's many different vehicles that we can use to help you get to the place that you need, right, to get that funding that you desire. So yeah, so that's what Access Granted is all about. It's about connecting those founders and funders, putting them in proximity, right? Because I always tell people you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And so the reason why so many of us are struggling to receive the financial resources is because we don't see the funders,
Yeah.
right? We're not in proximity to the people who have the capital and the capacity to make those resources available to us.
Right. That's amazing. I love it. I love it, Seneca. Look, it has been my delight talking with you today. I hope we can do this again at some point because
Absolutely.
there's so many things we have not touched on. So thank you so much, Seneca, for
My pleasure.
sitting with me.
I'm honored. Thank you for having me again.
Okay. Well, you've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Seneca Dunmore, aka the Pint-Sized Powerhouse. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day